The following weekend became a blur of soldering irons, carbon fiber struts, and enough caffeine to power a small city. My living room stopped looking like a suburban home and started resembling Tony Stark's garage after a rough night. I wasn't just building a drone. I was engineering a revolution. I ordered a heavy-lift hexacopter frame, industrial-grade motors capable of carrying 20 pounds, and a flight controller sophisticated enough to fly itself. The piece de resistance, however, was the payload. I sourced a lightweight aluminum lockbox, and with a petty grin plastered on my face, I painted it the exact hex code match for Brenda's beloved Whisper Cloud White. Malicious compliance is a dish best served with a high-gloss finish. I rigged a remote-controlled winch system to the underbelly of the drone. The plan was intricate, yet simple. The drone would launch from my fenced-in backyard, completely out of Brenda's jurisdiction, fly over the roof, and hover at the exact regulation height of 42 inches above the street easement. It would wait for Dave for the mail carrier to make his deposit, and then zip back to the safety of my patio. Technically, at no point would any structure touch the forbidden soil. I spent Sunday calibrating the GPS hold. It had to be rock steady. I couldn't have my electric bill accidentally chopping Dave's fingers off. My neighbor, Bob, watched from over the fence, shaking his head. "You're gonna start a war, son," he warned, cracking a beer. "She's going to have a stroke." "That's the plan, Bob," I replied, tightening a propeller. "That is the plan." Monday morning arrived with the tension of a duel. I sat on my porch, controller in hand, waiting for the telltale rumble of the mail truck. At 10:15 a.m., Dave turned the corner. He slowed down at my driveway, looking confused at the empty patch of dirt where my post used to be. That was my cue. I throttled up. ZZZZD. TTT. The sound was like a swarm of angry hornets. The drone lifted off, cleared the roof, and swooped down, stabilizing perfectly next to the truck's window. The Whisper Cloud box dangled invitingly. Dave jumped, spilled his coffee, and stared. I waved from the porch. "Morning, Dave." "Airmail." He burst out laughing, shaking his head in disbelief, and stuffed a bundle of letters into the hovering box. "Success." But the celebration wasn't over. The distinct sound of a sliding glass door slamming echoed down the street. Brenda stormed out, wearing a floral bathrobe and a look of pure horror. She pointed a trembling finger at the sky, her face turning violet. "What is that?" she shrieked. I grinned. "It's not touching the ground, Brenda." Brenda didn't just stand there. She went nuclear. As the drone hummed back to my patio, landing softly on its designated landing pad, a lawn chair, she was already furiously punching numbers into her phone. Within 20 minutes, a squad car rolled up. It wasn't It was Officer Miller, a guy who mostly dealt with teenagers skateboarding too loudly at the park. He looked at the empty hole in my yard. Tin-eyed Brenda, who was waving the bylaws like a holy scripture. "Officer," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my garage door. "He is operating an unlicensed aerial delivery system. It violates Section 4. Paragraph 2 regarding fixed structure. It is a menace to public safety." Miller rubbed his temples, clearly regretting his career choices. He looked at me. "Sir, is the object attached to the ground?" "Not even a little bit, officer," I replied, leaning against the door frame. casually sipping coffee. It is a transient aerial vehicle. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, the air above my home is navigable airspace. Brenda here is trying to enforce zoning laws on the sky. Miller suppressed a grin that threatened to crack his professional demeanor. He turned to Brenda, who looked ready to explode. Ma'am, if it's not touching the ground, it's not a fixed structure. And unless AS shooting lasers at planes, it's not a police matter. This is a civil dispute. Take it up with the board. He tipped his cab and drove off, leaving a cloud of exhaust and awkward silence. Brenda stood there, trembling with the rage of 1,000 suns. Fine, she hissed, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. You want the board? Emergency meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Be there, or face immediate lien foreclosure. The community center that night was packed tighter than a sardine tin. Word of the mail drone had spread through the neighborhood group chat like wildfire. Half the neighbors were there for the sheer entertainment value. The other half were there because they secretly hated Brenda's regime too. The room smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and anticipation. Brenda sat at the head table, gabelle in hand, looking like a Supreme Court judge presiding over the trial of the century. She opened the meeting by projecting a grainy, zoomed-in photos of my drone onto the wall. It looked like a blurry UFO sighting. We are here, she announced, her voice echoing dramatically off the cheap acoustic tiles, to address a rogue element in our community, a blatant mockery of our shared aesthetic standards. She spent 20 minutes railing against the dangers of technology, the visual pollution of spinning rotors, and the slippery slope toward total suburban anarchy. She used words like abomination and mechanical pestilence, painting a picture of a dystopian future where drones blotted out the sun. Bob, my neighbor, snickered audibly from the back row. When she finally paused for breath, wiping sweat from her brow, I stood up. I didn't have a fancy speech prepared.
I didn't need one. I walked to the front, placed the thick binder on the table with a heavy thud, and smiled. The silence in the room was heavy, the kind of thick, suffocating quiet you usually only find in libraries or funerals. I looked at the board members, then at Brenda, whose face was currently a fascinating shade of magenta. I cleared my throat. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I began, my voice steady and echoing slightly in the hall. Brenda here claims I violated Section 4, but Section 4, subsection C, clearly defines a structural improvement as an object permanently affixed to the earth. My drone is not affixed, it is an aircraft. I paused for effect, making eye contact with Steve, the treasurer, who looked terrified. Furthermore, I continued, leaning in, under Title 49 of the United States Code, the Federal Aviation Administration has sole sovereignty over the national airspace. Unless this HOA plans to formally secede from the Union, your bylaws stop where the grass ends and the air begins. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Neighbors nudged each other, a few pulled out phones to record the moment. Someone in the back shouted, "He's got you there, Brenda." Brenda slammed her gavel so hard the plastic head flew off and skittered across the table. Order. This is trickery. He is mocking the sanctity of our neighborhood character. We cannot have flying machines buzzing around like mechanical mosquitoes. The only thing mocking this neighborhood, I countered, raising my voice to cut through her screeching, is the fact that you stole my property. You removed a federal mail receptacle without a court order. That's not a bylaw violation. Brenda, that's a potential felony. I'm willing to drop the police report I filed this morning. If my original mailbox is reinstalled by noon tomorrow, the fines are wiped, and I get a written apology. The other board members exchanged nervous, sweaty glances. They didn't sign up for federal lawsuits, they signed up to decide on pool hours. Steve cleared his throat. He was a quiet man who usually just nodded. But tonight, he looked down with Brenda's reign of terror. Brenda, Steve said softly, we can't fight the FAA, and we certainly can't afford a legal battle over a mailbox. I moved to reinstate the homeowner's original mailbox immediately and waive all fines. You can't be serious, Steve, Brenda gasped, looking betrayed. Seconded, yelled Bob from the back row. The room erupted in applause. It wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. The spell of fear was finally broken. The vote passed, 4-1. Brenda sat stunned, her gavel handle limp in her hand, a queen dethroned by a tow helicopter. She gathered her papers and stormed out, muttering about the decline of Western civilization. The next day, a maintenance crew watched closely by a sulking Brenda from her window. Reinstalled my post. I got my standard mailbox back, standing tall and proud. I retired the drone to a shelf in my garage, a silent trophy of the Great Postal War, but every now and then, when I see Brenda walking her poodle, I give the propellers a little spin, just to hear that hum. She walks a little faster now. The mailbox stayed, but the message was delivered. Don't mess with a man and his mail. Enjoying this wild HOA drama and the chaos Karen keeps creating. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story, where I take on neighborhood nonsense with a little creativity and sometimes a drone. If this episode made you laugh or shake your head, drop a like and tell me in the comments, what HOA rule have you seen that made absolutely zero sense?